we need to talk about something serious, something that affects every single gun owner in America. The fight to end unfair restrictions on suppressors just took a dangerous turn, and you need to know what's happening right now. Here's the situation. The Trump administration's Department of Justice finally admitted something huge. They said suppressors are protected by the Second Amendment. That's right. They're admitting these are arms that Americans have the right to own. But here's the catch. Even though they admitted this, they're still saying the government can restrict them. They're still defending the National Firearms Act, the NFA, which makes it incredibly difficult and expensive to own a suppressor. And now, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals just sided with them. They agreed that yes, suppressors are protected arms, but they say the government can still control them through permits and taxes. This decision has massive implications for every gun owner in America. Let me explain why. If you care about your Second Amendment rights, I need you to do something right now. Subscribe to this channel. Make sure YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you without you knowing. We need to get this information out to as many people as possible. I also want to thank First Form for supporting this channel. They're a company that actually stands for something. They're pro-freedom, pro-America, and they support the Second Amendment. Plus, they make great supplements. If you're thinking about getting healthier in the new year, check them out. Right now, when you order supplements, you get a free 5-pack of protein sticks. Now, let's dive into what's really going on. This all comes from a case called United States versus Peterson. And what happened to Mr. Peterson should scare every gun owner in America. Back in 2022, federal and state law enforcement showed up at Mr. Peterson's home in Louisiana. He had a home-based federal firearms license. And they didn't come quietly. 50 officers, an entire federal task force, ATF agents, all showing up to execute a warrant. They searched his home. They searched his business. They claimed there were issues with record-keeping, problems with paperwork. Some items bought from his business supposedly turned up at crime scenes later. But here's what really got him in trouble. In his bedroom safe, he had a single solvent trap. It wasn't registered as a suppressor under the NFA. That's it. That one item in his own bedroom is what landed him in serious legal trouble. Mr. Peterson fought back. He filed a motion to dismiss the charge based on the Second Amendment. He argued that the law itself is unconstitutional, that Americans have the right to own suppressors without jumping through all these hoops. The lower court said no. They denied his motion and let the charges move forward. So he appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And at first, the Fifth Circuit sided with the Biden administration. They said suppressors aren't necessary parts of a firearm. They said you don't need them to make a gun work, so the government can restrict them. Mr. Peterson and his lawyers weren't giving up. They asked for a full panel review of the case. But then something interesting happened. The Trump Department of Justice took over the case. And they did something unexpected. They changed their position. They admitted, for the purposes of this case, that suppressors are protected arms under the Second Amendment. This was huge. This was a game changer. It meant the case had to be reviewed again with this new understanding. The 3-judge panel in the Fifth Circuit went back and looked at everything again. And this is where things get really frustrating. Even after admitting suppressors are protected by the Second Amendment, the court still said the NFA restrictions are legal. Here's their reasoning, and you need to understand this because it's dangerous. They said the NFA operates as a shall-issue permit scheme. What does that mean? It means if you fill out the paperwork, pay the tax, and pass the background check, you get your suppressor. So in their eyes, it's just like getting a concealed carry permit in some states. They twisted the Supreme Court's decision in the Bruen case. In that case, Justice Kavanaugh mentioned that concealed carry permits might be okay if they use objective criteria like background checks, fingerprinting, and fees. But here's the problem. The Fifth Circuit took that statement about concealed carry permits and applied it to the NFA's registration and taxation scheme for suppressors. They said it's basically the same thing. Think about what this means. If this logic holds up, the government could require permits and taxes for any firearm. They could require registration for handguns, rifles, shotguns, anything. Just call it a shall-issue permit scheme, and suddenly it's constitutional? This is not what the Second Amendment says. This is not what shall not be infringed means. After this ruling, Mr. Peterson asked for a full panel review again, but the Fifth Circuit denied it. The Trump Department of Justice actually agreed that the case should just be dismissed at this point. Then the Fifth Circuit did something else. They issued a mandate. This means the lower court ruling would go into effect. Mr. Peterson would face the consequences of his conviction. So his lawyers filed a motion asking the court to stay that mandate. Why? Because they're taking this case to the Supreme Court. They wanted the Fifth Circuit to pause everything while the highest court in the land reviews the case. And here's the important part. The Trump DOJ didn't oppose this motion. They were fine with pausing everything while the Supreme Court looks at it. But the Fifth Circuit denied the stay anyway. They said, no, we're not pausing anything. The mandate goes into effect even though you're going to the Supreme Court. Do you understand what this means? Mr. Peterson might have to report to prison while the Supreme Court is actively reviewing his case. He could be locked up while the highest court in America is deciding whether his conviction should even exist. His lawyers explained this to the Fifth Circuit. They said if he goes to prison and the Supreme Court later rules in his favor, he will have been deprived of his liberty for a conviction that shouldn't have happened. He'll have served time for something that wasn't even constitutional. The Fifth Circuit didn't care. They denied the motion anyway. They basically said, too bad, report to prison even though the Supreme Court might overturn everything. The district court had already said Mr. Peterson could stay out on bond during his appeal. They were going to set a date for him to surrender after the appeal was decided. But now the Fifth Circuit is forcing the issue. This case isn't over. Mr. Peterson is taking this fight to the Supreme Court. And he has another option. He can ask the Supreme Court for an emergency stay of the mandate. Even if they haven't decided whether to take his case yet, they can pause everything and keep him out of prison while they consider it. This might actually help his case. The fact that the Fifth Circuit is treating him this way, forcing him to potentially go to prison while the Supreme Court reviews everything, shows how mishandled this case has been. It shows how high the stakes are. The Supreme Court needs to take this case. They need to review it. Because this isn't just about one man and one suppressor. This is about whether the government can put up endless barriers between you and your constitutional rights. If the Fifth Circuit's logic stands, what's to stop them from applying it to everything? Want to buy a handgun? Fill out this permit application. Pay this tax. Wait 6 months. Want to buy ammunition? Same thing. It's a shall-issue permit scheme, so it's fine, right? This is not what the founders intended. This is not what the Second Amendment protects. Shall not be infringed means something. It means the government can't make you jump through hoops and pay taxes just to exercise a constitutional right. Suppressors don't make guns more dangerous. They make them safer for your hearing. They're safety devices. In many countries, they're encouraged or even required for shooting. But in America, we treat them like dangerous weapons that need to be heavily regulated and taxed. This case represents something bigger. It's about whether courts will actually enforce the Second Amendment or whether they'll keep finding creative ways to let the government restrict your rights. The Trump administration admitted suppressors are protected arms. That should have been the end of it. That should have meant the NFA restrictions are unconstitutional. But instead, courts are bending over backward to find ways to uphold these restrictions anyway. We need to pay attention to this case. We need to support Mr. Peterson's fight, because his fight is our fight. His rights are our rights. As this case develops, as we learn more about what the Supreme Court will do, I'll keep you updated. This is one of the most important Second Amendment cases happening right now, and it deserves our attention. If you found this information valuable, like this video, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. All of those things help spread this message to more people who need to hear it. You can also check out the other videos on screen that YouTube thinks you'll find helpful. Thank you for supporting this channel. Thank you for caring about your rights. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars. Stay informed, stay engaged, and keep fighting for your rights.